Thank you. And here we go, moving from the environmental impact to food safety, yet another issue. Jens Karsten, a German lawyer who's also working for the European Vegetarian Union and hence based in Brussels, will be our next speaker on this topic. He's also a freelance researcher in the research team of the Free University of Brussels. He has gained a lot of experience in EU affairs by working both inside, yeah, we can already clap. There he is already. I'm going to quickly elaborate a little bit more. Experience in EU affairs by working both inside and outside the European Commission and in public affairs in Brussels. Jens studied law at the University of Frankfurt am Main and did his Master of Laws in European Law at the University of Nottingham in the UK. So, and with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was early on stage. Yeah, I'm the legal nerd. I will speak about law, the law that surrounds novel food generally and cultured meat in particular. I have a short presentation, not too many slides. A number of questions were put to me in order to prepare my talk. So obviously when we talk about cultured meat, but also when we talk about many new plants and plant products that have the potential to enrich the diet of Europeans that come from overseas, they are actually subject to a quite rigorous regulatory regime under EU law. That's the subject of novel food. I try not to be dull in my presentation. I try to be vivid and hands on the wheel with the many interesting, in keeping with the many interesting presentations we already heard today. But these are the questions that I will particularly tackle one after the other, and I hope it becomes more vivid, the law, and how it is actually crucial to push these products on the market. I mean, this is perhaps the first big thing I should say. This is, in terms of European food law, a product like cultured meat, which is produced using highly sophisticated technology, is a regulated product. A regulated product in the jargon of the European Food Safety Authority. Okay, many other food products also are regulated products, but what is common to them is that they need a pre-market authorization. Food law is complicated, but principles are often quite simple. And a very basic principle of European food law is that food that reaches the consumer must be safe. Fair enough, one should say. But that is actually something that a food business operator must guarantee. It must be in keeping with hygiene regulations. There must not be glass splinters in the marmalade or something. There's a body of law that is very developed, that's very clear. Now, with a regulated product, it's a bit more complicated than that. Of course, this food must also be safe, but in order to assure the safety, it needs to be tested, and it needs to be approved, and it needs to have an authorization. The European Commission in that game is the authorization authority. It's a bit of awkward English, but I hope it explains the point. So there is a complex mechanism, complex procedure in place that would be, in regulatory terms, quite a high threshold to pass for a product like cultured meat reaching the consumer. It's also not quite the same threshold, but there's also a threshold to pass for, an exotic fruit. That indigenous people in Amazonia have eaten for generations, but is completely new to this market, but has a huge potential as a superfood, for instance. But such a fruit that nobody has had imported before a certain point in time fixed by the European regulator would also need to be safety assessed in many cases, or it needs to be at least to be notified. This is the reality that a food business operator face, also the researchers face, and also the vegetarian movement faces, as far as it's interested to have new products available for people preferring a vegetarian lifestyle. I think the staggering figure is something about 30,000 plants that can be eaten in the wealth of the world's botanical life. And it's ridiculous that we rely as basic, as staple crops on maize, on various cereals, and on potatoes. So this is the challenge. This is the regulatory challenge. Now I come to these questions. What is novel food? I have to explain that point a little bit more. What are the criteria for guaranteeing consumer safety? Yes, that was the introduction given to me. What are the conditions for new plant-based foods? Yes, that's the one branch of my presentation. And the other, what is so special about cultured meat? And then speaking about really making this available for the consumer is what methods maximize marketability. Now, there is a term that was coined, I think, in the 1970s, Columbian Exchange. Anybody knowing what Columbian Exchange means? Well, it's actually the exchange of plants, but also animals between the New World and the Old World. Basically, when Columbus discovered America, shortly after, from the European point of view, potato, maize, tomato, and cacao were discovered, and there were novel foods in 1500. I mean, potatoes are very common nowadays in Europe, but at the time of the discoveries, it was new. So, of course, novel food law, nobody thought remotely of that at the time. It was basically tested and practiced that these crops could be eaten. An interesting, more recent example is the kiwi fruit. The kiwi fruit, I've learned, was introduced in the mainstream food market in Europe, in the European community in the 1970s. At a time, well, food law was not so much developed, at least on the European side, but the kiwi fruit was not tested as it would be tested now as a novel food. But there are a number of issues. Some persons have perhaps allergic reactions to it. All this was basically tested in practice. So the kiwi fruit was pushed on the market as a new product, as a new plant-based product in the 1970s, free from the shackles of novel food regulations. Now, that is different nowadays, and the example I mentioned here on my slide presentation is chia seeds and pili nuts. Chia seeds are probably already known. They are common to, I understand, Central America. They are part of the diet there for a long time. But they had needed a novel food authorization, which was the first one was granted in 2009 and now are granted slice by slice to extend the uses in various food products. That, of course, was a bit of a surprise and a nasty surprise for the nations exporting into Europe. Also other examples could be quoted, and there might be issues before the World Trade Organization because these countries, and there's, for instance, a complaint on file from Peru saying that this is a technical barrier to trade in international trade relations when the European Union insists on a novel food assessment. And that for something relatively innocent like chia seeds. Of course, you can eat too much of them, and that's not good for you. So the consumer must be informed about it. The other example that's very recent, that's pili nuts. That's a nut native to the Philippines. Again, a vegetarian product, a vegan product. There, one has had the nasty surprise that somebody raised an eyebrow, and they were now provisionally listed as a novel food. This will be rectified soon. I come to that procedure. That is now on the way in a minute. Now, I'm a lawyer. I like to talk about law, but not too much for this audience, but still it's good to know these two instruments that are listed there. The one is the regulation of 1997. This was the first installment of novel food law in Europe. The regulation was actually decreed by the European legislator not so much to deal with the issues that interest us today. This was decreed to deal with the issue of GMO at the time. So GMO, there was a wish to have GMO law harmonized in Europe. So regulation was in order to agree. But at the time, also the European regulator, also sort of to perhaps make GMO look a little bit more innocent, just looked at other food categories that would be novel in the sense of the word, novel, and that would probably need a safety assessment before being marketed. And one thought, for instance, about sort of also engineered food ingredients like fat replacements that have a new molecular structure, also sophisticated food engineering and so on. Fair enough, perhaps when there is no experience of safe consumer use, perhaps that should be checked beforehand. But the main idea of the original 1997 regulation was GMO. Then a decision was taken in 2003 to separate GMO regulations from novel food. So since 2003, the body of law I'm talking about and GMO regulations are two kettle of fish to be separated. But the rest, the sort of rest of the regulation stayed on and to exist. Establishing this market entry requirement for innovative food regulators. And for a number of reasons, there was an attempt made to modernize this framework of law earlier in the century. Long story, not interesting today, but since 2015 we have a new regulation in place that are now enforced since the 1st of January 2018. Now, and I quote the objectives here from this regulation. It's sort of prophylactic, prophylactic consumer protection, and also to have the internal market functioning. Let's face this is about the economy, this is about the food, the internal market in food, so it should not be hampered by different regulatory regimes between France, Germany, and the rest of the community. But also important, and I find that also putting this in context with the previous, with cultured meat in particular, which is the focus of today's seminar, with innovation, environment, and food security. So, I come back to that in a minute. But first of all, what is novel food? Now, here simply I quote the law. Any food that was not used for human consumption to a significant degree within the European Union before 15th of May 1997, falling under one of the 10 legally defined novel food categories. Those I haven't listed. The one on cultured meat I will quote a little bit later. So why this awkward date, 15th of May 1997? Well, that was actually the date when the first novel food regulation entered into force, here, the 258/97. The interesting thing is that everything that was marketed before that target date, any food is considered safe as such, if it's not rotten, so to speak, if it's not unsafe. But everything that is novel to the European Union since has to undergo a pre-market assessment. Now that can be a problem, for instance, when you had, I speak about for the moment still of the exotic fruit. Say if you have the peely nut, that's the example. The peely nut was traded before 1997 to a significant degree, I'd say, and even a few landing bills, a few sort of bills of shipment could be extracted that showed that there was a bit of trade between the Philippines and the European Union. Still that was, and that I think is an accident, was a mistake, but still it was deemed to be insufficient in this particular case. Well, anyway, so imagine this 1997, that's 22 years from now. That's also, to an extent, the pre-computer age, or at least the age where not loads of data were stored forever on some hard disk that you could extract, so you rely on paper, and the paper is probably no longer there. So many innovative, this is about innovation, innovative products. An innovative product can be an exotic crop from another country, have to undergo this quite significant procedure of novel food authorization. What are the criteria for guaranteeing consumer safety? Well, here again I quote the law, I just read that, we don't need to go too much into detail. Well, First indent, the food does not, on the basis of scientific evidence available, pose a safety risk to human health. Fair enough. I mean, this is the proof that has to be furnished also for cultured meat, clearly. It must not mislead the consumer, especially when the food is intended to replace another food and there's a significant change in nutritional value. Well, yes, cultured meat is supposed to replace, to an extent, conventional meat. Right? And there might be indeed differences in nutritional value. So the full breadth of the test program must be carried out for cultured meat, that's for sure. Also the third indent, where the food is intended to replace another food, it does not differ from that food in such a way that its normal consumption would be nutritionally disadvantageous for the consumer. Okay, well, perhaps there is a certain nutritional value attached to conventionally produced beef, for instance. Cultured meat that is supposed to replace it or to be an alternative to it. Well, it must be clear that it provides the consumer with the nutritious wealth of the food product as conventional produced products. There might be labeling requirements, instructions for use, consumers' consumption patterns, allergen warnings, also with a view to vulnerable groups of consumers like children or the elderly. Now, I'm hopping between cultured meat and plant-based food in my presentation here. What are the conditions for new plant-based foods? Well, they need to be, well, it's the same as for other novel food. Here, with plant-based foods like my nut or the Amazon fruit that is not yet known, there is a procedure that facilitates things. That's a notification procedure for traditional foods from a third country. So if you have proof, for instance, that, let's stay with Amazonia. Indigenous people in Amazonia eat this particular fruit for generations. You can provide proof for that. That can help you if that remains not contradicted by the member states or by the European Food Safety Authority, can actually be notified and becomes marketable as a novel food. There is an example here. I have no idea what decorticated grains of Digitaria exilis is, but those who are interested may look up the product and its conditions of use, etc., with this Commission implementing regulation, and there are pending authorizations for products, plant products, fonio, haskell berries, and Moringa stenopetala. Again, we will be curious to find out what that is. Now, that's about plants or the general framework. Now, what is so special about cultured meat? Well, for a food lawyer like me, cultured meat is or will be, as soon as the first application will actually be filed, will be the test case for food innovation par excellence, right? The 2015 regulation that entered into force with 1st January last year promised to make things easier for innovative food enterprises. Now we will put that to the test. Europe has some defaults, we know that. And the administration can produce funny results, as I find the peely nut is a good example of. But we are still in regulatory terms. I mean, it's very impressive to hear the scientific side and how researchers and enterprises have advanced in their research and how close we actually are to have the cultured meat burgers grilled for us. The regulatory test has not been made yet. And a comparison can be made between Europe and the United States. And even under the present administration, the American approach is very pragmatic. You have the two big bodies of the US administration, the Department of Agriculture and the Food and Drug Administration, and they organized a large conference in October last year. You find that online. It's quite interesting for those who are interested in the regulatory environment of cultured meat. So they organized a big talk, bigger than ours today. in October, and very recent here, of the 7th of March, they issued this statement of joint regulatory oversight. Now, we must not be interested here in Europe too much what the Americans do. Well, by comparison, yes, but this is not the law. This is US law, not ours. That compares sharply to the very few statements made so far by the European institutions on this very hot topic of cultured meat. What I found, and perhaps I have overlooked something, but still I don't think so, the Joint Research Center is the scientific branch of the European Commission. They issued a paper already in 2013. You find that online if you like. There is the scientific branch of the European Parliament, that's EP STOA, sorry, I speak Brussels jargon a bit, that's my professional default. Anyway, you have something written there. What if all our meat were grown in a lab? And then you have, and that's interesting, the written parliamentary question on, and here somebody speaks already about potential risks. If you read this written question by the MEP, by the member of European Parliament, clearly he has been informed by the conventional meat lobby. They wake up to the challenge. Yeah, we speak about law, but we speak also about public affairs, and that is lobbying. That is a clash of interests. If cultured meat succeeds, conventional meat has a problem, right? So let's brace for that discussion. Let's call it a discussion. But anyway, the statements of the EU are few. What I can relate here to the audience is that I had already conversations with the desk officers responsible for novel food of the European Commission. Those who would receive the applications from food business operators or somebody else for cultured meat authorization. So I can assure you, they have woken up to the challenge. They know this comes towards them. They have already some ideas what the test program might be. The test program might be quite significant and include everything that novel food regulation can muster in terms of complications. So that's the reality. Cultured meat, that's interesting. Also, again, as a test case for the innovative character of European law. Cultured meat, in regulatory terms, touches all the 4 pillars of food law. And the 4 pillars of food law are food security, food safety, food information, and nutrition. In terms of food security, and I put it here first, it's about safety of supply. Now, we face huge challenges for reorganizing the food chain in the future. That's very clear. And mainly driven by sustainability and population growth. And they are already, I mean, the debate is in Brussels, I think, is quite well informed. We have papers like Food 2030, Food 2050 circulating that really look into the future and try to sketch, the challenges for the future, also for the regulators. So safety of supply is that we have simply enough to eat. Right? It's also the only food priority for the pending Council presidency of Romania, of Finland, thinking of the previous speaker, and of Croatia. Food safety, yes, cultured meat is a novel food, that's very clear. Food information, I will speak about that a little bit, and here I might really make a contribution to the debate because we haven't touched upon the complications of the law here as yet, and nutrition, because cultured meat nutritional value might be indeed a bit different from conventional meat, not in any problematic way, but it's a new product. So, okay. Here, for everybody who wants to know what the law is, this is this Article 3, 2a, and then 6 in Latin numbers, says here that a novel food is that a food that is isolated from or produced from a cell culture or tissue culture from animal plants, microorganisms, fungi or algae, and yeah, that's considered novel food under the regulation. Clearly, this is for cultured meat, among other things. So cultured meat is a novel food par excellence. Do I need to rush? All right, okay. Then we rush to the interesting part. Here, this is... Right, denomination meat. We speak about cultured meat as if cultured meat was already an accepted term. I think it will become so. But I put this in a dichotomy between cultured meat and conventional meat. Now, if you're interested in the law, you have rules for what can be called meat. Right? And there's the hygiene regulation animal product, yeah, that speaks, I abbreviated here, edible parts of animals including blood, right? And then you have the food information regulation that speaks of meat as skeletal muscles of mammalian and bird speaks, is recognized as fit for human consumption plus connective tissues. Now, the debate that's inevitable is, and certainly we will be challenged, is whether cultured meat will fall under these categories and can therefore be called meat. So we have here to deal with a stem cell technology, right? It's extracted from a live animal. It's grown in a bioreactor. Okay, I don't try to in any way to copy here what previous speakers explained much more competently. But then, you know, we will probably have a debate and read the slide presentation, perhaps it will be circulated after. You know, is the character meat dependent, for instance, on the fact that the animal product that you have on the plate comes from a slaughtered animal? Or could it be something like an extract, like it was explained earlier, so from a biopsy? Does an animal need to be killed in order for the product to be called meat? We will have this debate, inevitable, because the future will be this conventional meat, cultural meat economy, or we might have a little culture war. Because speaking here for the European Vegetarian Union, we have a challenge here. Veggie schnitzel, that's now plant-based meat alternatives. Yeah, veggie schnitzel. We have here, we are challenged from the meat lobby here. They want the privilege that for dairy already exists. You look very sternly there at me. So I come to the end. I come to the end of my presentation, and then we might have a discussion. Yeah, this might be also more lively. This is the last slide. Anyway, consumer acceptance, we talked about this. We have reservations of the conventional food sector. That might be the case. Yeah, and then I repeat myself a little bit. Also, with a view to the next political season, 2019 is a very interesting year for those who work in Brussels, because we have European elections, we have a new commission, so we might have a new food policy for the next 5 years to come. And this is the litmus test: clean meat, cultured meat. We will have a return of the sustainability debate. We must also think for a moment also about the SMEs in the room, the small and medium-sized enterprises, if they have any chance to push new food products novel food products on the market without being suffocated by the regulatory burden. And about EFSA, I don't speak too much. But last point, we have position paper on novel food on our website, the European Vegetarian Union, and I'll leave it there and be happy to have a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens. I can totally see that as a very complex issue, but we're running a wee bit late, so we have just time for one question. So who wants to be the one? Okay, I saw your hand first there with the glasses, hang on. See, there is more question. Okay, good.
Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering if a member state will be allowed to ban a novel food if it's recognized as safe in the community.
If a member state is allowed to ban a novel food? When
yes, on its territory.
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
That was short. So if then I have still 3 seconds, I come back to this slide. Really, this is perhaps the...
Yes, Jens, sorry. We actually have time for a second question because you were so short. Okay, so here we go.
Thanks. Steffi Dudek, Analyze and Realize here from Berlin. I have a question not about cultured meat, because there the novel food status is rather obvious, but what about plant extracts? There are a few, in my opinion, concerning appraisals that came out recently on, for instance, mung bean protein isolate, for which I do not see a big difference to lupin isolate, bean isolate, and these kind of products that also entered the market after '97. So do you have any idea about that? Because
Well,
it might have a tremendous effect on this population here.
Sure. About this particular product category, I'm not informed, but the big thing, if you want also to read something in a newspaper that matches, I mean, your question, is cannabis. Yeah? So cannabis products in food, right? And there is a big debate currently raging, and this is, of course, unrelated to cultured meat, but very much related to plant extracts, you know. Can cannabis products, especially in food supplements, be marketed as food? The matter is not settled. The Novel Food Catalog has since January a new entry where it says that cannabidiol products, or extracts actually, extracts, we don't speak about the plant, we speak about, you know, enriched formula, perhaps not quite clear what the categorizations are. But there we have a multi-billion-dollar business. Really, this is big money also involved, which explains the lobbying frenzy going on for the moment. And you can read it in the newspapers. And that is definitely, that is not the part of the novel food regulation I quoted here. Read the 10 categories, look at what category could be the particular group, product could fall under, and then you can see probably, and you find more examples when you keep your eyes open. You can see the potential or the challenge of novel food regulations, because it's an in and out thing. If you are not novel food, your food must be safe and can be marketed instantly. If it's novel food, you need to have potentially a huge procedure to pass in order to have a market authorization that then, however, is valid for the whole of the community. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And another big round of applause for Jens. Thank you. Maybe if someone else has a question to him, there will be a very short break now. We will take a 10-minute break and see each other in 10 minutes again for the panel. If you have questions to Jens, maybe approach him now. This would be your chance. So see you in 10 minutes.